Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. For this episode, we're going to be talking about a classic album that has led me down a bit of a rabbit hole. The discussion will focus on Slayer's Live Undead, early classic live tracks from the band. Picked up this CD version of it a couple of years ago, and every time I've played it, something has kind of bugged me about it. And the issue is, I feel like there are songs that I remember being on Live Undead that aren't on here. So something always seemed a little off with the track list. Finally, I pulled out my old vinyl pressing of it, compared it to the CD pressing, and realized that, yeah, the track lists are notably different in a couple of ways. So it wasn't just my imagination or me not remembering the album correctly, there really is a difference. This led me to go check Discogs and see what other pressings and versions might be out there. It turns out there are 94 different pressings of Slayer's Live Undead. And I have gone through all 94 of them to figure out how many different versions of the track list exist. And that's what we're going to dive into today. So, a couple of things to point out before we go through these. When I'm talking about pressings, it's just that. Anytime the album has been issued by a different label, reissued by a label, something like that. When I'm talking about versions in this video, I'm going to be talking about unique track lists, where a track list has a unique combination of songs or the songs are in a unique order. Right? There are not 94 different versions of the track list, but it turns out there are a lot. But yeah, there's so the pressings and versions are going to be a little bit different. I'll try to be consistent when I'm explaining that. Also, this is a minimum of how many pressings there are. There are probably pressings of Live Undead that have been made that just are not available on Discogs at this point. Nobody's ever entered the data for them. So the 94 should be considered a minimum because there are probably some unknown ones out there. It also means the different versions of the track list that I'm going to go through should also be considered a minimum. There could be pressings that I'm unaware of that, well, simply don't have any documentation for. If you notice a different version of a track list that you're familiar with, you have a pressing that contains it, by all means, please put info in the comments down below and add to the list here. But without further ado, it's probably time we started walking through some of these because it will take a little bit of doing. For this, we're going to need to switch views a little bit, share the screen, move this little thing over here. And yeah, with this much information, I had to build this in a spreadsheet to try to lay it out and make it a little easier to see. So we're going to start with what I'm calling version A, which is the original Metal Blade version of Slayer's Live Undead. This is a pretty common version. Fans who are around at the time will know this one. It's available on all the Metal Blade picture discs that were made. And there are a lot of different versions of that original Metal Blade picture disc. The pictures I'm showing are all taken from Discogs entries. The big thing with the picture discs, what makes each version or makes each pressing, again, they're pressing differences, is the color of the rim. You can see right here that the edge of this particular pressing has a white rim around the picture disc. Other copies of the picture disc come with different colored rims. There's an orange one, there's a red one, there's a pink one, there's a salmon pink one, which apparently is different from the pink one and the red one. So yeah, you could literally collect about 9 different versions of the picture disc with the different colored rims. There's also something listed as a rainbow picture disc pressing that all of these pressings have this particular version of the track list. It's 6 songs. They're listed over here. You, of course, have Black Magic, Die by the Sword, Show No Mercy on the A side. Then you've got Captor of Sin, Haunting the Chapel, and Final Command on the B side. Something to keep in mind with this is that originally Live Undead was a half live release. You had the A side being live tracks, and you had the B side being studio tracks taken from early releases like Haunting the Chapel and Show No Mercy. Quick side note, there always has been controversy about whether the live tracks are really live. The version that's been reported is that there was kind of a contest where winners could get to go see Slayer record live in the studio. And so these tracks were recorded live in New York, but in a room with like maybe a dozen people or so. That's the version that you tend to hear about it. Even the engineer, Bill Metoyer, has always kind of sidestepped the question. He's on record in interviews as saying that I'm not sure I'm supposed to tell you whether it's live or not. So yeah, there's always been a little debate about it. So just a quick aside about the whole Live Undead project as it is. But this is the version Metal Blade originally put out, and this version of the track list really only shows up on the original picture disc. As we're going to see, it doesn't get reused on later pressings. So let's look at the next version of the track list. This one appears on the original Roadrunner LP. Roadrunner, I'm assuming, licensed it from Metal Blade for release in Europe. And the picture over here shows that, yeah, it's pretty distinctive because it's got this kind of white frame on the cover around that central circular picture. And, it has, of course, the classic Roadrunner labels. Everyone knows the Roadrunner logo. So yeah, this is the pressing that was essentially for Europe. And it also has 6 songs, just like the Metal Blade pressing, but the songs aren't the same. On this one, you get Black Magic, Die by the Sword, and Captor of Sin on one side, and then Haunting the Chapel, The Antichrist, and Fight Till Death on the flip side. So notice what's happened with this version is basically it has added Fight Till Death and the Antichrist. That's why I've got them highlighted in red font. But it has left off Show No Mercy and Final Command, which were on the original Metal Blade press. So yeah, the track lists got a bit mixed up when this got licensed for Europe. It's a weird phenomena, but at the time, it tended to happen pretty frequently. I've got different like US and European pressings of lots of different albums where this kind of thing happened, that the label that was licensing it tinkered with the track list for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but it probably varied from case to case. But it is a thing that used to happen pretty frequently. So this is version B. This would be considered like, the original Roadrunner version of the track list. All right, let's go to version C. This one is a variant on the Metal Blade pressing. This is the Metal Blade cassette press from 1985. And out of all 94 pressings listed on Discogs, this one cassette pressing is the only one that has this particular version of the track list. It's another 6-track or 6-song track list with the same 6 songs that are on the Metal Blade picture discs. However, the tracks on the B side are listed in a different order. In this case, tracks 4, 5, and 6 go Final Command, Captor of Sin, Haunting the Chapel. If we go back to the Metal Blade picture disc version, the tracks were Captor of Sin, Haunting the Chapel, Final Command. So, same songs, but in a different running order here. Seems kind of odd that they would have rearranged the songs on the B side, but I actually, checked the pictures that were shown of the cassette tape, which are included down here below the notes. It's in very small font on the J card and it's very blurry, but I've zoomed in on it and read it off, and the tracks are listed in this particular order on side 2 of the cassette. Final Command, then Captor of Sin, and then Haunting the Chapel. As you can see on the picture of the cassette shell, the songs aren't actually listed there anywhere, so that doesn't really help any. But the J card, although it is blurry over here, the track listing can be seen and it is listed that way. So this one original cassette pressing from Metal Blade seems to be a unique version of the track list. Same songs that Metal Blade had used for their vinyl press, but the B-side tracks are shuffled into a different order for reasons. No idea why they would do that. Moving on, there's a fourth and last, what I would consider original pressing, or I guess original version, I should say, of the track list, and this is the original Japanese version. So this one's being called version D here, and it's another one that has six tracks. If you have a copy of Live Undead with six songs on it, it's one of these early ones from 85 or 86. But the track list on this Japanese pressing, which was done on Far East Metal Syndicate, is notably different from versions A, B, and C we've looked at, because this time they included the songs Chemical Warfare and Aggressive Perfector. Again, I've got them highlighted in red since they're appearing here for the first time. Songs that you don't see used here, we don't see the Antichrist, we don't see Show No Mercy, we don't see Final Command, and we don't see Fight Till Death. And if we look at the pictures of the labels of this Japanese press, we can confirm that, yeah, the tracks on each side are the way that they're laid out and listed on the Discogs entry. It's these six tracks here. So this is not particularly unusual. Again, Japanese pressings are kind of famous for having different track lists, although in most cases they get bonus tracks added rather than some songs taken off and other songs put on, which is what's happened here. So these first four versions, A, B, C, and D, all came out in 1985 and 1986, and that's kind of the time frame we should consider for these original versions. Something else I should point out here before we go on. I'm saying 1985 for these pressings and versions like from Roadrunner and Metal Blade. If you look on Metal Archives, you're going to see a late 1984 date for these. So there's even disagreement between different sites on whether it should be 1984 or 1985. I kept the 1985 date for these early pressings and early versions since I was getting a lot of the info from Discogs. However, Metal Archives mentions this disparity on the dates, and Metal Archives states that they got the 1984 date from the Metal Blade, documentation and archives. So probably these actually did come out in very late 1984, and the Discogs date of 1985 is incorrect. I kept it since the data was coming from Discogs, though. But yeah, even the release year for Live Undead, it tends to cause a little bit of a debate here. All right, if it was just those four versions, we'd be right, but there's several more to go. Uh, Version E is up next. This is a pretty big change. One thing you'll note right away is that it now has eight tracks instead of just six. So two tracks are getting added. And this eight-track version of the song list became really, really standard in the late 80s and early 90s for a lot of the reissues. So version E, I've labeled it as kind of the first big Metal Blade reissue version. Um, of note, here's where you get Evil Has No Boundaries making its first appearance on Live Undead. It also has picked up Aggressive Perfector and Chemical Warfare, the two tracks that we saw that were unique to the Far East Metal Syndicate version pressed in Japan in 1986. And as you can see on the list over here, again, tons of different pressings of this in a lot of different territories: Japan, Germany, Canada, European areas, Southeast Asia, South America. This eight-track version by Metal Blade was very, very common when they reissued Live Undead for a good number of years. So a lot of people, this is probably the version they have if they didn't get the original one back in 85. All right, moving on to the sixth version, version F. This one I'm calling the Paradox version because it only shows up on one of the 94 pressings listed on Discogs. It's listed as a CD from Brazil on Paradox, which is a label I'm not familiar with. It's also eight tracks, and it has Aggressive Perfector and Chemical Warfare added to it. But when you look at the first six tracks, It's actually the original 85 Roadrunner track listing. So basically, this is what you have if you took that original version Roadrunner put out in Europe and added Aggressive Perfector and Chemical Warfare as two extra tracks. So, okay, that's neat. It's only this one pressing out of all 94 that has this. However, there is a catch here. When I checked the actual pictures of the physical media that are posted on Discogs, the pictures on both the disc and the tray card, which I've included here, they don't show these eight songs as being present. Instead, they show the eight songs that are on the version E track list, the one I just looked at a moment ago, the really common Metal Blade reissue one. And you can see this on the pictures over here. So, for example, this one is starting with, again, Black Magic, Die by the Sword, Capture of Sin. Those opening three songs become kind of canon on reissues. But then tracks 4 and 5, you got on the pictures over here, it lists Antichrist and Evil Has No Boundaries. The track listing on Discogs is typed in as 4 and 5 should be Haunting the Chapel and Antichrist. So something doesn't match here. If we look at the picture of the tray card, we see the same thing. The picture of the tray card, as we go down it, has the same eight songs that are printed on the disc. And you can see the Paradox label over here below the Metal Blade label on the CD itself. And also down here at the bottom of the back tray card, there's the Paradox label on the bottom right corner, the Metal Blade logo in the bottom left corner. So there's a conflict here. One of two possibilities has occurred. One possibility is that the entry on Discogs is incorrect, that whoever entered these eight songs over here got the list wrong, and those eight songs don't really appear on this CD. And instead, you get the eight songs like you see printed on the CD and on the tray card. If that's the case, then this version F does not exist. It's not a real thing. And this particular Paradox CD pressing should just be listed with version E. However, there is another possibility where version F could be legit. It is possible that the info on both the disc and the tray card that I'm showing here are misprinted. And this kind of thing can happen, especially when something's getting licensed in a different territory by a different label. It is possible that when Paradox pressed these up, they took the graphics with the track lists from the popular reissue at the time, which would be version E, but the source material they were using for the recording was taken from the old Roadrunner version. And that would be why you have the track list appear to be very similar to the original Roadrunner pressing. I don't know which of those two scenarios is true. The only way to solve that is somebody would have to have this Paradox CD, play it, and see what songs actually play. Do you hear the eight songs as listed on Discogs over here? If so, that means the disc and the tray card are misprinted and version F is a real variant. If you hear the eight songs as they are typed out and shown on the CD and the tray card, well, then it means the Discogs entry is incorrect and version F does not exist. There's no other pressing among all 94 pressings that has this particular track list. So it'd be really interesting to know if anybody has this particular Paradox press of the CD. It's listed as 1996 from Brazil. I would love to know what songs you hear when you actually play the disc. That's the only way to resolve whether version F is legit or not. And that's why I said this Paradox version is disputed. Because, yeah, the two track listings that we see on Discogs versus the physical media don't match up, but I can't resolve the conflict without hearing it. Oh, we still have some versions to go, so let's move on. Version G is another reissue version. that Metal Blade eventually stopped making that 8-song version and started doing a 7-song version instead. And this one, basically, you lose the track Chemical Warfare. Otherwise, the 7 tracks, it's just like that version E, the really popular, widespread reissue that Metal Blade used for years. But for some reason, they pared it down by a track. They dropped Chemical Warfare so that it now has 7 songs instead of 8, which I don't really get why you would do that, but that's what they did. And this is the pressing that I've got here. This pressing, whichever one it is, has this version G of the track list on it. As you can see, this one's been very popular and used for a long time. A lot of the CD pressings by Metal Blade um, from the early 90s up into the 2020s have this 7-song version of the track list. So this is a very common one. A lot of, especially younger fans, this is probably the version they own and are familiar with that has these 7 songs on it. But wait, there's more. Version H is another pressing that contains 7 songs. This particular version, the track list only appears on 2 CD pressings, both in Brazil, both in the 1990s. One pressing from 1993 and one pressing from 1998. And again, the track list here resembles the old Roadrunner version of the track list, not the old Metal Blade version of the track list. So it's basically, yeah, the same as what you would have gotten if you bought the 1985 Roadrunner LP. It has the track Aggressive Perfector as a bonus track. Another way to state this version is the same as that unusual Paradox CD from Brazil I showed a couple of versions ago, but with one less song, as this one doesn't have Chemical Warfare listed on Discogs as part of the track list. However, there are some issues with these CD pressings. When you look at pictures of the physical media, the 98 CD pressing only has a picture of the front cover art. So there's nothing there to show you what songs are included on the disc or the tray card. So that's kind of a dead end. However, there are pictures included from the 93 pressing that I've pasted in here. And once again, the tracks that are listed on Discogs, the 7 songs I've got over here on the left, they don't match what is printed on the physical media. If you look at the physical media, there's the CD on the right and the J card down here. They've got printed on them the version G track list, the one I just showed you that Metal Blade has used for a number of years on their reissues. So once again, this version is in dispute, and it's the same situation as it was with the Paradox pressing. The Discogs entry could be incorrect, that whoever entered the info on Discogs just got it wrong, and these 2 CDs actually contain the songs as printed on them. And if that's true, then version H is not a real variant. And both of these CD pressings should be listed as different pressings that have the G version of the track list. However, these 2 CDs could be mispressed as well. Once again, the only way to resolve this would be to own or find somebody who has these 2 specific versions of the CD and play them and see which 7 songs you hear. Do you hear the 7 songs entered on Discogs? If so, version H is legit, and the discs and tray cards were just misprinted. But if you hear the 7 songs as printed on the physical media, then the Discogs entry is wrong, needs to be corrected, and we can scratch version H out. It doesn't exist anywhere. All right, we have one last one. We're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Our ninth pressing here. There is a version of Live Undead that actually contains 11 songs, and it's as shown here. What this one boils down to is that it contains The seven songs from the version G variant, the one that's been the popular Metal Blade pressing for a number of years now, then the four extra songs are all from the Haunting the Chapel EP. And see, even this gets a little bit weird because Haunting the Chapel originally had three songs on it. Aggressive Perfector was originally on the Metal Massacre Volume 3 compilation, but that song got added to Haunting the Chapel as a fourth track on some early reissues of Haunting the Chapel. So most people think of Haunting the Chapel as having four songs. So to make it kind of easy, you could say, yeah, this is the seven tracks from version G, and you get the four tracks from Haunting the Chapel. So I guess if you wanted to be really, really nitpicky, you could say you get the three songs from Haunting the Chapel, and you get the one song that was originally on Metal Massacre 3. This particular 11-track version only shows up on three different pressings out of the 94 on Discogs. The first time, the kind of earliest version, or sorry, the earliest pressing of this version is from Bulgaria, of all places. In 1999, Wizard label printed a cassette of Live Undead that contains all 11 of these tracks. And that's the J card you see pictured here to the right. And it does list all 11 tracks in the same order as they appear on Discogs. So this does seem to be a very real thing. All right. The same version of the track list appeared on a CD pressed in 2000 in Russia. There's a question mark there because, there's some issues sometimes figuring out exactly when things were pressed in Russia, but it contains the same 11 tracks too. And someone has mentioned to me that they have this CD pressing. This came up in a Heavy Metallurgy live stream a few weeks before I made this video. As I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've never seen that version. Now I've seen 94 versions and I can't go back. But yeah, so someone did mention they have this particular version with 11 songs, so that seems to be legit. The third and last time this particular version of the track list was used was on a CD pressed by Thrust label in Australia. And there was no year of release included on Discogs for that. It's in that unknown section where there's like, we know it's a thing, but we don't have an actual year entered for it. So yeah, this is kind of the longest version of Live Undead, but it's only been used in these, three pressings, from overseas countries, at least overseas from the United States. So there you have it. Again, across 94 different pressings of Live Undead, you've got nine different versions of the track list. There are two of these versions that are, contentious. I've gone through the details on those. If both of those were proven to be typos on Discogs, it would reduce the total different versions of the track list to seven versions instead of nine. So where does that leave us at the end of the day? Kind of going back to the original question of, can you name all the songs on Live Undead? Well, to do so, you've got to list 13 songs. And here's kind of every song that's appeared on Live Undead over the years. To get all 13 songs, you can't buy any one particular pressing of Live Undead and get them all currently. And it's actually pretty aggravating. To get all 13 of these tracks on copies of Live Undead, you would have to buy a minimum of three copies currently. The reason for this is there are three songs that never ever get paired up on any of the different versions. The three problematic songs are Evil Has No Boundaries, which was not on any of the original pressings, then Final Command and Fight Till Death, both of which don't appear on a lot of pressings. If we go back and look at the early ones real quick, Metal Blade had Final Command included on the original press they made, and Roadrunner had Fight Till Death on the original press they made, but those songs didn't get used on a lot of the later, more popular and widespread reissues. So yeah, if you wanted to say you have kind of the ultimate Live Undead collection with every track that's ever been featured, you'd have to own at least three different copies so that you could have one copy that would have Evil Has No Boundaries, a second copy that has Final Command, and a third copy from one of the pressings that features Fight Till Death on it. I don't have that combination currently, and for the time being, I'm pretty content not to track it down because I've spent more than enough time figuring this whole mess out as it is. But that means it's time to wrap this up, and now let's talk Live Undead in the comments down below. If anybody can help unravel some of the questions on those Brazilian CDs, the Paradox press, the 93 press, and 98 press, are those Discogs typos or are those physical media that just, got misprinted? Would be great to know, but again, someone's going to have to obtain those or have those in their collection, and they're going to have to sit down and play them to see what they actually hear. We can't just read what's on the labels or on the J cards or the tray cards. But yeah, any info on that would be great. If you have other versions of the track list on some pressing that isn't on Discogs, it would be cool to know about that, just to add it to the total pool of knowledge here. And there's always the case possibility I've made a mistake somewhere along the way that I overlooked something on Discogs. I've spent a lot of hours splicing this together, but that doesn't mean it's foolproof. There could be an error here somewhere. If you notice something that I've gotten messed up or backwards, by all means, add some information in the comments down below to help correct it so people that are interested in this kind of thing can read through it, get updates, and we can try to get a more complete picture of what the heck songs are actually on Live Undead. That is going to do it for this video. Until next time, everybody take care, and as always, keep banging your head, especially to Live Undead.